Hello, friends, and welcome to Gunnimoto. I'm Kurt Linville. This is episode 2, and this one is a continuation from episode 1. So if you want to see the full ride, go back to episode 1 and watch that one first. This one picks up where, obviously, episode 1 leaves off. But in episode 1, we started out leaving Gunnison, going a little bit northeast, and got on Lost Canyon Road. We took that up through some ranch land and some BLM land until we finally got to forest roads, and we took Forest Road 743 up to over 10,000 feet. Then we turned onto Forest Road 586, which dropped down the backside of the mountain we had climbed, and 586 kind of parallels the Fossil Ridge Wilderness Area boundary and goes through some amazing terrain. So in episode 1, it was rocky, it was muddy, it was steep, it was forested. And in this episode 2, the terrain changes a little bit. It opens up into bigger features. In this case, it's going to be more crushed granite, sandier, more open spaces, bigger views of bigger mountains. So it really is a little different. We're also going to drop down into Taylor Canyon by the Taylor River, do a little bit of canyon carving, and we'll be talking about some of the fun that can be had along the Taylor River and in Taylor Park. The reason that I started this YouTube channel was because I knew that a lot of people came to Gunnison County to ride ATVs and motorcycles and to explore these beautiful mountains of Gunnison Country, and I thought maybe you would like some previews so you could see what the riding is really like. So this is a continuation of the first ride for Gunnimoto, and every ride in Gunnison can be different. The terrain changes enormously within this county, with over 3,000 miles of forest roads and BLM roads to choose from. There's a lot of fun to be had. So thanks for joining me today, and here we go. County is higher to the north with the Elk Range, higher to the west, not as high, but higher to the west with the West Elks. To the east, we have this Fossil Ridge and the Sasquatch Range. And a little bit further to the south, say southwest, we have the San Juans. Then to the southeast, somewhere in there, the Sangre de Cristo, Blood of Christ range starts at its northern end. So we're surrounded by higher peaks everywhere. That's why I said we start at 7,700 feet and go up from there. I think the high point on today's ride is less than 11,000. Almost 11. Now the audio just keeps kind of getting worse from here, especially when I start revving up the engine to go uphill. So doing a voiceover again. Thank you very much for bearing with me. Future episodes will have less voiceover and most of the audio will be what's going on the ride itself. But I look forward to going back and exploring all of these side roads like the one we just passed. There are a lot of little side roads. The ones going east don't go that far because you get to the wilderness area, and of course a wilderness area is where no machines are allowed, not even a bicycle. The ones that are going to the west, well, I'm not sure that they go very far because there's a mountain there that I don't see a road going over. When you go over the mountain, if you were to stay on the main road, 743, then there's several that snake off to the west, and they kind of network through the BLM road. And I have been on some of those, but not all of them. But I'm looking forward to going back and exploring those. So, as you can see, I don't know if you can tell much that the terrain has changed, but the soil is different and the rock is different. And especially after we cross this creek right down here, then it gets really, really sandy. And that's kind of where the sandy section starts. And it pretty much stays sandy the rest of the way. Fun little creek crossing. So you can see the crushed granite here. Sandy going. Different kind of riding. Luckily, it's not super deep sand. So it's just enough to make the bike a little squirrely, but not too bad. So as we're climbing out of this creek bottom, the views just get bigger and bigger. And what you really start seeing are some of the mountains that make up the West Elks. You know, it's kind of funny. You may have noticed that I have a cell phone holder on the bike. Can't quite see it here. Well, there it is. Anyway, the reason I put that there was not so much to have a cell phone as to have a speedometer. I downloaded an app on my cell phone that used GPS to tell me how fast I was going because this bike doesn't have a built-in speedometer. And the funny story is that I took it on a pretty good ride, and then I pulled my cell phone off the bike to take a picture, and lo and behold, the picture was just jittery, jumping all over the screen. Come to find out that it's a known thing with certain motorcycles. By the way, this is a super steep hill right here. This is one of the steepest hills and the sandiest hills on the entire ride. And yeah, the back of the bike is hard to keep in place on this. But as you can see, we're climbing up to some massive views, which is really fun. But certain bikes, the vibration, I guess, of the motor, it confuses the image stabilizer that's inside of the cell phone camera. And so the image stabilizer starts being jittery even when the camera's being held still because somehow it gets messed up by the vibrations that it got from the motorcycle. So I decided that was really sad. I thought I was going to have to buy a whole new cell phone just because I love taking pictures, didn't want a phone that didn't have a camera in it. And so quit riding with the cell phone on the bike. And then, strangely enough, after a couple of weeks of not being jittery, the image stabilizer somehow reset and started working again. So if you ever experience that, I don't know if yours will start working again or not. And like I said, it took a while, but mine came back and started working again. But now I have a bigger problem. I still don't have a speedometer. And I shouldn't confess this, but when I'm on the highway, I usually find someone that looks like they're driving conservatively, and I just pace them. So, boy, we are really getting back up again now, and I don't know how high the elevation is at this point, but the views really are astounding. And I believe I stop here in just a second. Yep, there we go. Now, what you're seeing, the two mountains in the background, the one on the left that's flat is called Flat Top. Surprise, surprise. The one on the right is actually called Red Mountain, and it is red when you see it in the right light. And then the foreground peaks, I really don't know what those are, but there is a peak right in the saddle, almost center screen right now, barely poking up, and that is Mount Crested Butte itself, where the ski area is, just peeking over these lower mountains here. This hillside has some private property on it. You might see a sparkle in there. That's a house. There are a few houses in there. Man, that hillside a couple of weeks ago was just golden on fire. So beautiful, but I think a lot of the aspen have lost their leaves. But as you can tell, it's just a beautiful place to ride. And man, Colorado air. We should talk about Colorado air. I mean, granted, it gets cold, but Colorado air is dry and fresh, and there's something magical about it. My family visited Colorado when I was 10 years old, and I think the air might be one of the main things that made me fall in love with it. I somehow knew deep in my soul, even as a 10-year-old kid, that someday I would live here. And the day I graduated from college, actually, it was the day after I graduated from college. I walked across the stage, went home, loaded up my new Bronco 2, and headed to Colorado. I knew that this was a place I wanted to be, and didn't know for sure what I would do here for work or what would happen, but I knew that whatever was going to happen, I was going to build a life in Colorado. My goal was to live in the Front Range in Denver, to build a career, find a wife, start a family, and enjoy what Colorado had to offer. And I thought it wouldn't take very long. Well, the punchline is it took a very long time. I was living in the city of Denver for 7 years, and I'm not a city kid, so it just about killed me. But I did start the career, actually 2 careers. I was a math teacher and a science teacher for a couple of years, and then I decided I wanted to be able to support a family, and my beginning teacher salary was just not great. Here's a super steep one. Again, this is one you can't really stop on. You just have to roll with it, because if you put on the brakes, all you're going to do is skid, especially in all the loose, crushed granite. But I decided to go into the business world and put my math degree to work in other ways. And so soon I was working for Cellular One, and I met a wonderful lady named Ann, and she became my wife. And finally, we moved to the foothills, northwest of Golden, southwest of Boulder, a place called Wonderview. And there we raised our family of 4 kids for 20 years before we finally moved to Gunnison 5 years ago. And I often wonder why we didn't move to Gunnison sooner. Gunnison, Colorado is such a special and magical place. And I would have loved to have been here about 10 years earlier than we came. But, there's the career. There's trying to figure out a way to earn a living. And when you're living away from those resources, meaning jobs, it can be tricky. So Gunnison County, wow, what a magical place to be. By the way, the direction that you're looking right now, kind of looking between Flat Top and Red Mountain, behind that you can see a little bit of another mountain that's sticking out, and that is the West Elks Wilderness area. And other rides, I'll take you up near the boundary for the West Elks Wilderness across on the other side of the valley. The reason I bring it up, though, is because there was once a volcano there. And I say once, this was a long time ago. But, the peaks in Colorado peak out. The highest ones are 14,000 feet. And it depends on what criteria you use for counting, but they're either 54 or 58 of those, and they're all 14,000 feet, Mount Elbert being the tallest at 14,400 and something. Anyway, this volcano that used to be right where you're looking was around 20,000 feet tall. So that was a prior rendition of these Rocky Mountains, obviously. 20,000 foot tall mountain right there in the heart of the West Elks. And that mountain had a few eruptions, and it created most of the geology and topography in that part of Gunnison. And it wasn't a small peak, but on the other side of the valley, almost everything over there is clearly volcanic, where what I'm going through here is more metamorphic with the granite and stuff like that. But on the other side of the valley, it's kind of volcanic. I'm going to call it volcanic sedimentary, but I'm no geologist. You'd have to ask my son, who knows more about that stuff than I do. But lots of basalts, some lava, a lot of tuff and breccia, and things that volcanoes form, and it gives much of Gunnison County just a really unique topography, cliffy cliffs that you really can't climb because they just come apart in your hands. And then on this side of Gunnison County, we're really more in the Sawatch Range influence. And so with all the granite, there is good climbing over here and a completely different type of geology. So I just always found it fascinating that there is a volcano of that size right over there. Now, another volcano in this area is actually south of Gunnison, a Fairdale, and it was called La Garita. And when geologists first realized that the area down there was actually a vast caldera, a volcano that had collapsed in on itself. So you may be familiar with Crater Lake, right? Or Lake Tahoe. Those are volcanoes that collapsed in on themselves and formed calderas that filled up with water. Well, the La Garita caldera is vast. And when I say vast, I mean it may be the biggest volcano ever on Earth. It's bigger than Yellowstone, which is a vast supervolcano. It's bigger than the Yellowstone volcano, of which, by the way, is still active by a long shot. But La Garita is not active anymore. And the caldera itself is so huge. Geologists calculated when it blew its top and then caved in on itself, they measure the amount of material that came out of that in cubic kilometers instead of the normal cubic meters because this volcano was so huge. So if you decide to ride south out of Gunnison through Lake City and on toward Creede, Colorado, you're headed into La Garita. Parts of South Park were formed by the La Garita caldera, and it's just another fascinating thought that potentially the world's biggest volcano was right here just a few miles south of Gunnison. Well, this is not the end of the ride, but this is where we start diving down a little canyon into Taylor Canyon. And I pause here. There are like 3 different roads that go in different directions, and someday I'm going to explore those, hopefully with you. But today, we're going to head down this road on the right, which, like I said, goes down a small little creek canyon, fairly steep and bony, and then we're going to pop out in Taylor Canyon. Do you see the fairly deep rut in the middle of the road there? When you're on a 2-wheeled machine, like a motorcycle or a mountain bike, and you get in one of those ruts, especially if it's wet and muddy, then as you try to steer out of the rut, it throws you back in, and as the tires are thrown back in, it tends to try to throw the bike or the motorcycle the opposite direction. And it's just a really good way to find yourself sliding across the ground instead of on your 2 wheels. But I don't know what the best way is, especially when it's muddy and slippery, to get a motorcycle out of those ruts. When I slip in one, usually I just try to ride with it for a ways, let the speed bleed off of the bike, and then try to find a place where I can pop out. But as you pop out, you're almost guaranteed that the rear tire is going to try to stay in a little bit longer than the front. It's going to spin you sideways. You know, I look at that and I think it's kind of a metaphor for life, isn't it? There's so many traps in life, ruts that we can find ourselves in, and I think everybody who's ever lived from time to time gets stuck in a rut. I mean, it could be a career rut, it could be a family rut, or bad habits. Whatever that rut is, it's hard to get out. And I'm not sure what the answer is, except maybe you need to ease off, look for an opportunity for an exit, and realize that that exit's going to be pretty tough. But usually, if the rut's deep enough, you might need some help, some encouragement from friends or family, or maybe some professional encouragement. But seeing those ruts there just made me think, I don't feel like you're alone, that you have fallen in a rut from time to time. Everybody does that. And maybe that's one way that life tells us to slow down, to ease off, and look for an opportunity to head off in another direction. So this hill, by the way, goes down very steeply, and it's diving into Taylor Canyon. We're almost there. I'm excited to show you Taylor Canyon. Now, Taylor Canyon is a forest road, but it's a paved forest road, and it connects Highway 135 at Almont, north of Gunnison, with Taylor Park, which is further up. And recently, in the last few years, they actually paved Cottonwood Pass that'll take you from Taylor Park to Buena Vista. And it's a super curvy, super high mountain road that goes way above tree line. Obviously, it's closed in the wintertime because the snow is just crazy up there. It stacks up 20 feet deep or deeper. But in the summertime, it makes for a really fun paved ride or ride in a car. It's beautiful. The scenery going through the Sawatch Range there is just remarkable. And it goes between various 14ers. So it's lovely. But Taylor Park, so in Colorado, a park is kind of an open, flat area that's between mountain ranges. And there's several parks in Colorado. South Park might be one of the most famous because of the silly cartoon. But South Park is a pretty vast, flat area that's between the Front Range, the Mosquito Range, and the Sawatch Range. And there's also the San Luis Valley, which is a park as well. There's also, I believe that people call it North Park, but a park that is closer to Steamboat up to the north. Well, Gunnison is in a small park. The Tamichi Valley and the Gunnison River valleys form a park-like area, but it's just not huge. It's more of just a broad valley. Well, Taylor Park is really more of an honest-to-goodness park. It's not as big as South Park, but Taylor Park is pretty good sized. And so in Taylor Park, you have Taylor Reservoir, and the Taylor River comes out of that. You have all sorts of streams that are coming down out of the Sawatch Peaks. So going right here would take you up to Taylor Park, but I'm going left back toward Almont, but I wanted to take a moment to show you the Taylor River, which is just beautiful. Amazing trout fishing. Right below the dam of Taylor Reservoir is a gold medal stretch where they pull out massive rainbows, just massive rainbows. This is worth a better look, so getting off the bike here so I can show you this. Now, these cliffs are not the breccia cliffs that cave off in your hands. Instead, these are granite, and it's really excellent climbing in this canyon. But man, there's hardly a more beautiful, I don't know about more beautiful, there aren't many rivers as beautiful as the Taylor. And people do quite a bit of whitewater rafting and kayaking on sections of the Taylor. And of course, lots and lots of fishing. It's just a lovely place to come and enjoy nature. The one thing about fishing in the Taylor is that it has large, rounded, mossy stones on the bottom. So as you're trying to wade around in there, the currents are fierce, and you might find yourself mid-thigh, and you're trying to balance on those mossy, rounded, large stones. It'll wear you down. It will wear you down. Not easy footing, but it is a delightful place to fish. Okay, now we're going to go down Taylor Canyon and do a little bit of canyon carving. which it's not that extreme, but as you'll see, it's a nice curvy paved road where you can just enjoy the canyon views. And in a way, it's a really pleasant way to wrap up this epic ride on Forest Road 586. The slab here on the right is a popular climbing place. And right here, if you look closely, you might see a mountain bike or two. Right there is where people park for an epic mountain bike ride called Doctors. And Doctors, well, what you do is you ride your bike down there, some mountain bikes right there. People often shuttle this ride because there's a long, grueling, just open road climb to get to the beginning of it. So people will drive their bikes to the top of that and leave a car down here so they can do the fun part. But anyway, you go down the highway here a bit, and then you turn right just after we cross this bridge that's coming up, and that's Spring Creek, which is coming into the Taylor River. So you go up the Spring Creek Canyon for a good distance, and then you get to bike up a super, super steep road, crazy steep road, and then it turns into riding single track through the forest, one of the best downhills in Gunnison County, just glorious. And then at the end, you wind your way down, actually down the canyon wall, and there's where Spring Creek joins the Taylor. So where the trail goes isn't actually on rock. It's just where a bluff is super steep, and they carved the trail into the mountain, but tight switchbacks, and you drop down right into this canyon where we are now. It's one of the favorite rides for mountain bikes. I don't know if it's open to motorcycles. I should look, but even if it is, I wouldn't be taking my motorcycle there because I don't want to get in the way of the mountain bikers. It's just such a glorious mountain bike trail. On the left, you see a beautiful ranch. You'll see a little bit more of it coming up here. And it's actually a ranch that's kind of held by people that have a house up here. There's an HOA, and this subdivision, they share the ranch land, so you can have your horses or other animals and do what you would do with a ranch. But then the houses are around the edges and up on the mountain itself. And matter of fact, earlier when we were on the high place and I pointed out the sparkling house across the valley, I believe that that's how you get to these houses, is that you have to go into this ranch and up a road that goes over a saddle right here. And so, man, if you want to live in a little pocket of paradise and you've got enough coin to pull it off, it's a beautiful place. It's relaxing after bouncing around on the dirt to get on a highway like this. And you saw the speed limit sign, 40 miles an hour. So it's slow enough. You don't have to feel pressure from traffic to go faster than you might want to on your dual sport. Now, if you're on your adventure bike, you're probably going to wish you could go a lot faster. But regardless, I really enjoy this easy mountain road just to unwind. And at the end of this road is Almont. And in Almont are a couple of different restaurants. I like the Three Rivers Resort. They have outdoor seating. Sometimes they have live music. And it is a hickory smoked barbecue venue with great beer and just one of the best outdoor settings. I would even say beer gardens in this part of Colorado. So it's fun at the end of this ride to go in for a snack and put your feet up for a while and maybe catch some live music. Now we're crossing the Taylor River again. Something I find really kind of interesting about Almont, it's where this road comes out on Highway 135. That's where, they call it the Three Rivers Resort, that's where three rivers come together. And the reality is it's really two rivers that make a third. Most rivers take on the name of the bigger river where there's a confluence. For instance, the Mississippi and the Missouri, where they come together, the Missouri is called the Missouri, and the Mississippi is called the Mississippi, and they form the Mississippi because that's the bigger of the two rivers where they have their confluence. But the crazy thing is that if the Missouri River were called the Mississippi instead of the other way around, then it would be the longest river in the world, longer than the Nile. But because there's more water coming from the other side, and that side is called the Mississippi, then the mighty Mississippi didn't get the longest river star, nor did it get the biggest river star, because of course there are bigger rivers than the Mississippi, like the Amazon. But here, it's kind of a strange thing, but you have the East River that joins with the Taylor River, and the two of them together create the Gunnison River. So the Gunnison is the combination of the East River, which comes down from Crested Butte, and the Taylor River, which comes down Taylor Canyon. And so they call it Three Rivers Resort, when actually it's more like a confluence of two rivers. But the other thing that's interesting about this, you notice we're in the forest, lots of trees, beautiful forested mountains. And in Almont, if you go left, which is south, then you quickly are in BLM land. You leave the forest behind. And from Almont, if you go north, then the mountains just get larger and larger and larger until you end up in Crested Butte and the Elk Range. By the way, this campground on the left here, looks like they're having a cookout of some sort. That's called Campfire Ranch, and a friend of mine runs that. If you would like to try tent camping, but you don't have the gear and you've never done it before and you don't know what it would be like, then Campfire Ranch might be the one for you. They provide all the gear, or you can bring your own, but they provide all the gear you may need. They also have a concierge service, so if you stay there, then you can enjoy your campfire and camping in a beautiful natural setting. But the concierge service will also jump you in a van or plop you in a van, and they'll drive you to various attractions around Gunnison County. If you want to do fly fishing or go on epic hikes or go up to Crested Butte and see the sights up there, lots of different activities that they will take you to. So it's a fantastic way to come and camp in Gunnison County, even if you don't have the gear, and to kind of see what it's like. If you've never camped before, it's a great way to experience it for the first time without having to buy all the expensive gear to do it. So we are now coming in to Almont, almost. You see a smattering of houses, not quite there, but we're close. Something interesting about the Gunnison River. You may have heard of the Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park. It's another amazing sight to see. Below Blue Mesa Reservoir, you enter Black Canyon, or Black Canyon exists. You can't necessarily enter it very easily. But Black Canyon is an amazing, deep, sheer-walled canyon, much steeper walls even than the Grand Canyon. And the Gunnison River goes through there. The story that's kind of crazy is that Montrose wanted water from the Gunnison River, and to get that, they wanted to make a tunnel that went through the canyon wall and popped up on the upper part of the Montrose Valley. But no one had ever been down the Black Canyon. It's Class 6 rapids in some places. It had never been boated or floated. And a couple of guys said, well, someone's got to survey it to see where the right place is for this tunnel. And so they got a couple of rubber mattresses. They didn't even have air mattresses back in that day. I don't know where they got these rubberized mattresses, but they volunteered to go down the Black Canyon of the Gunnison on these air mattresses to survey it for the very first time. There's a bluegrass song about that. I don't know if you've heard it, but it was an amazing feat, and somehow these guys survived. And sure enough, they built the tunnel, and now water comes from the Gunnison River and into the upper Montrose Valley to irrigate that land there. That is the Almont Post Office. And we're coming to the end of the ride. I stop off here for a snack and to put my feet up and to celebrate another glorious Colorado afternoon. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. This is what this part of Gunnison County looks like. And until next time, keep riding, keep smiling, and thanks for viewing.